They looked at her clothes, not her name on the ticket. Minutes later, they were standing face to face with the woman who signs their paychecks. She didn't look like someone you'd expect in first class. That's what they'd say later, in whispers and awkward glances. Monica Rhodes had arrived at gate A23 in Sacramento International about 20 minutes before boarding. She was dressed for comfort. Grey hoodie, loose jeans, white sneakers that had seen better days. No makeup, no jewelry, not even a carry-on Louis Vuitton, like the woman beside her clutching a caramel latte. Just a leather-bound folder tucked under her arm and a phone with a cracked screen in her back pocket. When the gate agent called first class to board, Monica stood and quietly stepped forward. A few eyes flicked up, registering her, then moved on. No big deal. But the moment she reached the aircraft door, the tension started. The flight attendant barely glanced at her ticket. Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, expression unreadable. "Ma'am, this is first class. You must have the wrong group." Monica stayed calm. "I'm in 2A. She held up her ticket. It was clear. First class. Row 2, window seat. The attendant squinted, glanced again, then gave a half smile that wasn't really a smile. "Are you sure this isn't someone else's ticket? Did you maybe get it printed wrong?" "No, I booked it. That's my name on it." Her tone stayed steady. Behind her, the line of passengers was starting to stack up. A man in a navy blazer gave a little cough, checking his watch. A couple in their 50s exchanged looks. The attendant sighed. "I'll have to check with someone. Just step aside, please." Monica didn't move. "I'd prefer to take my seat now, if that's okay." Her voice was low, but firm. Still polite. Still steady. But the attendant's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm asking you to step aside until we verify." Another woman in uniform came up to the front, younger, trying to smile, but you could see she'd already been told the situation. "She says she's in first class," the older one muttered. The younger one turned to Monica. "Hi there. Let's just clear this up real quick, okay? Could you step over here?" It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Like they were trying to de-escalate something that hadn't even escalated yet. "I don't understand what needs to be cleared up," Monica replied. "That's my name, my seat, my ticket." A man in line muttered something under his breath. A teenager behind him chuckled. The older flight attendant folded her arms. "Look, if this is going to be a problem, we can have you board after the rest of the plane has seated." That's when someone behind Monica finally spoke up. "Let her through," said a woman in her mid-60s, sitting in 1B already. "She's got a ticket. What else do you want?" It didn't seem to help. Monica inhaled slowly, then exhaled through her nose. She pulled her phone from her pocket, opened the screen, dialed. "Hi, it's me." "Yeah, I'm at the gate already. Can you come up?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw around titles. She just made a simple phone call. The attendant stared at her for a moment, unsure what to make of it. The couple in line glanced at each other again, this time more curious than skeptical. The teenager lowered his eyes. A small girl in row 4, curled beside her mom, looked up from her juice box and watched quietly. Something was happening, but they didn't know what yet. But that calm phone call was about to shift the entire atmosphere of the plane. The call ended without drama. No big show. Monica simply slipped the phone back into her pocket and stepped to the side, as requested. Her face didn't flinch, didn't harden. Just quiet stillness, like someone who'd been through this more times than she should have. Passengers continued filing in, some watching her, others pretending not to. That woman in 1B glanced over again, this time with a longer stare. The kind that says, "I've seen this happen before." A man 2 rows behind Monica, with silver-rimmed glasses and a Stanford Law sweatshirt, leaned slightly toward his wife and whispered, "She probably scanned the wrong gate." His voice wasn't angry, just sure. He never considered that maybe, just maybe, she belonged exactly where she was standing. The young flight attendant tried softening things. "We just have to follow protocol. I hope you understand." Monica didn't answer right away. She looked at the name badge. Caitlin. Then nodded once. I understand more than you think." Her tone wasn't sharp, but it landed. The air in the cabin tightened slightly. One of those moments when people feel something shift, even if they can't explain why. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. Still, no movement. Monica stood still, barely blinking. The older attendant kept her arms crossed. Caitlin glanced at her, waiting for guidance, but none came. And then voices at the front. The doors opened again. A man in a grey blazer with a badge clipped to his chest stepped into view. He wasn't security, wasn't TSA. He looked like management, someone who didn't normally walk into planes mid-boarding. He scanned the cabin quickly, then spotted Monica and broke into a smile. "There you are," he said, walking straight up to her. The flight attendant stiffened. "Ms. Rhodes, I'm so sorry for the delay." He opened his arms slightly, the way people do when they're happy to see someone they admire. And then he hugged her, warm, respectful. No hesitation. Passengers shifted. The man in the law sweatshirt frowned. The couple looked surprised. The teenager leaned forward. Monica smiled back. Small and subtle. "Appreciate you coming." "Of course. Had to make sure everything was smooth. This your first time flying on your own aircraft in a while?" "Couple months." She turned toward Caitlin and the senior attendant, both now standing completely still. "I believe there was a question about my seat." The regional director glanced at the boarding pass, still crumpled in Caitlin's hand. He took it, confirmed it, then looked directly at the older attendant. "She's in 2A. She always sits in 2A. He turned to Monica. "Would you like an escort to your seat?" "I'll manage." She stepped past them, finally walking the few feet she'd been denied. As she moved down the aisle, the silence was heavy. Some passengers looked away. Others stared openly. That little girl in row 4 kept watching. Her mom leaned over and whispered, "She owns the airline." The girl's eyes widened. "She does?" The woman nodded slowly. "She built it herself." In 2A, Monica settled in. The seat fit like it had been made for her. She buckled in, placed her folder on the tray, and gazed out the window without another word. The regional director gave a quick nod to the attendants and left the aircraft. For a full minute, no one said anything. Then the older flight attendant spoke, just above a whisper. "Why didn't she say who she was?" Caitlin didn't answer. She just bit her lip and looked down, because sometimes people shouldn't have to say who they are. But Monica's silence said more than any title ever could. The rest of the boarding process moved like a slow, awkward dance. Every passenger who passed Monica gave her a different kind of look, some ashamed, others intrigued. One man offered a polite nod, like he was trying to make up for what had just happened. She didn't return it. Not out of rudeness, just tiredness. Caitlin walked the aisle, checking overhead bins, but you could see it in her eyes. She wasn't fully there. She glanced toward 2A every few seconds, like trying to solve a puzzle that embarrassed her more the longer she sat with it. The senior attendant disappeared to the back of the plane, leaving her junior to face the fallout alone. Meanwhile, the man in the Stanford sweatshirt fidgeted with his wedding ring, as if that could distract from the way his earlier assumptions now echoed in his mind. He'd been wrong, and he knew it. At 10:37 a.m., the cabin door shut. The engines hummed to life. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure," the captain said over the intercom. Monica didn't look up. Caitlin moved through her safety checks, pausing when she reached the front. She hesitated by Monica's row, swallowed, then forced a smile. "Would you like a glass of water or orange juice before takeoff?" Monica met her eyes. Finally. "No, I'm good." Caitlin nodded, quietly. Then Monica added, "But thank you for asking." Just 5 words. But Caitlin's face flushed. That was her lesson. Delivered without bitterness. The plane began taxiing. A soft rustle came from the back. That little girl in row 4 had taken her seat again, pressing her face to the window. She wasn't looking at the clouds, though. She kept stealing glances forward, trying to catch one more glimpse of the woman who'd caused the whole plane to pause. Her mom leaned toward her, whispering, "She used to sleep in her car. Now she's flying in one she owns." The girl blinked. She did? Yeah, and she didn't yell, didn't raise her voice. She just stood there. Exactly. As the jet lifted off the ground, some things stayed heavy. The silence, the glances, the quiet calculations in people's heads as they rewrote what they thought they knew. By cruising altitude, Caitlin came back through the curtain with a tray. She stopped next to Monica again. I brought you the orange juice anyway, she said gently. Just in case. Monica gave a half smile, took it and replied, Thank you. It was small, but real. And for Caitlin, it mattered. 20 rows back, the law professor tapped open a blank note on his iPad and began typing something. No one knew what it was. Maybe a blog post. Maybe an apology letter he'd never send. Maybe something for himself. The captain came over the speaker to announce flight time and weather, but nobody really heard it, because the mood had shifted. The power dynamics that existed on land didn't quite fly the same at 35,000 feet. Not when someone like Monica Rhodes was sitting in 2A, calm, still, and owned the very wings keeping them in the air. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was something more uncomfortable. Reflection. But reflection only matters when it leads to truth. And Monica's truth hadn't even been told yet. The thing is, Monica never wanted to build an airline. That wasn't the dream. What she wanted, back when she was just a teenage girl growing up in Bakersfield, was peace. A place where she didn't have to fight for space. A place where people didn't stare at her mother's uniform after long shifts at the nursing home. A place where silence didn't feel like punishment. Her first flight was at 17, a gift from a church fundraiser, one way to Seattle for a youth conference. She sat in the very back row, squeezed between a retired trucker and a teenage boy who wouldn't stop sniffling. But even then, with her forehead pressed against the cold window, something stuck. That was the first time she saw clouds below her. Something clicked. Years later, when her mom passed, Monica used what little was left of the life insurance check to enroll in community college. She studied logistics, moved into a friend's garage to save rent, worked nights at a FedEx hub, and washed dishes on weekends. She didn't party, didn't complain, didn't stop. People didn't see her back then. They looked past her. Or worse, they looked through her. At 28, she was driving Uber during the day and managing dispatch for a tiny charter airline at night. That's where it started. The idea. She kept noticing how inefficient the small carriers were, how they wasted fuel, overbooked routes, treated staff like extras in a movie. She scribbled in a notebook during her breaks, models, numbers, problems, solutions. She talked to pilots, asked questions, listened more than she spoke. One night, a frequent flyer, tech investor named Roland Bear, got into her Uber. He was late, grumpy. His flight had been delayed again. Monica asked him, half joking, "If you're so rich, why don't you start your own airline?" He replied, "Too many moving parts. Not worth the headache." And then he paused. "Why? You think you could do better?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." They didn't talk the rest of the ride, but 2 days later he called her, said he'd been thinking about it, said he had money but no time, asked if she had time and a plan. She did. That conversation changed her life. By 33, she had launched Ascend Air, a regional carrier with just 3 planes, all leased, and a skeleton staff. But the thing was, she treated every staff member like they mattered. The janitor, the receptionist, the baggage crew, everyone got full health care. Everyone had her direct number. And passengers noticed. They grew. Slowly. Carefully. By the time she turned 39, they had 12 planes and routes running across 6 states. Sacramento to Boise, Reno to Phoenix, Flagstaff to Salt Lake City. All short hops, but all with the same message. Comfort, respect, reliability. Monica stayed out of the spotlight. She didn't want magazine covers. She didn't take speaking gigs. She wore jeans to meetings and listened more than she talked. When board members pressured her to present a more polished image, she said no. "Polish doesn't fly planes," she said. People do. But being low-key had its costs. People saw her walking around terminals and thought she was staff. Some asked her to take their trash. One passenger even handed her his empty coffee cup and said, "Thanks, sweetheart." She didn't make scenes. She remembered everything. Back in her seat on that flight to Portland, Monica took a breath. The orange juice was still cold. She took a sip. To everyone else, she was just a story they'd repeat later. You won't believe what happened at a dinner party. But to her, it was just another Tuesday. Just another moment she wasn't supposed to belong, until they realized she did. But what happened next wasn't about her anymore. It was about what people did once they saw her for who she was. Somewhere over northern Nevada, the tension didn't dissolve. It just shifted shape. No one was whispering anymore. The energy had settled into quiet observation, that kind of stillness where you know something important just happened, but no one's quite sure what to do with it. Monica sat with her tray table down, flipping slowly through a printed report. Numbers, schedules, performance data, work. The kind of thing people in her position reviewed daily. But Caitlin, now serving drinks through the cabin, glanced toward 2A more than she meant to. She wanted to say something. Maybe apologize. Maybe explain. But every version that formed in her head sounded like an excuse. Instead, she moved through her tasks. A few rows back, the law professor stared out the window, his hands clasped on his lap, lips pressed together like he'd bitten back a comment too late. Regret, quiet but real, had rooted somewhere behind his eyes. Meanwhile, that little girl in row 4 hadn't taken her eyes off Monica. "Mom," she whispered, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "Can I say something to her?" Her mother hesitated. "What do you want to say?" "I don't know, just..." "She's cool," her mom smiled softly. "You can tell her that when we land, all right? But what if she leaves fast?" "She won't leave fast. People like her, they move different." In the seat ahead of them, an older man turned his head slightly, overhearing. He didn't speak, but his expression shifted. Back in first class, Monica folded the report and slid it back into her folder. She leaned her head against the window, closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Caitlin approached quietly with a fresh napkin. "Ms. Rhodes?" Monica looked up. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know. I didn't mean to disrespect you." Monica paused. "Disrespect doesn't always come from meaning to. Sometimes it's just what people are used to doing." The words weren't cruel. They were honest. Caitlin blinked. "I've been flying 3 years. I've never seen something like that." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you have. You just didn't recognize it." A beat passed between them. "I'll do better," Caitlin said. "I hope so," Monica replied. "But not just for me." Caitlin nodded once, quietly, and returned to the galley. The plane hit a mild pocket of turbulence, just enough to make a few passengers straighten in their seats. Monica didn't move. It passed quickly. In 1B, the older woman who'd defended Monica during boarding leaned over the aisle. "You handled that well," she said softly. "I've had practice." The woman chuckled. "They never see it coming, do they?" "Not until they have to." The woman sipped her tea, then said, "When I was younger, they wouldn't even let me through the front terminal. My first flight, I had to walk up from the tarmac like I was sneaking in through the side door." Monica smiled gently. "Things change." The woman shook her head. "Some things. People? Not always. But somewhere on that plane, something had changed, and it started with a little girl watching someone who looked like her do something powerful without ever raising her voice." The descent into Portland began smoothly. Clouds stretched below them like a slow-moving sea. Inside the cabin, the mood was still hushed, but no longer stiff. It felt like everyone had come out of something, even if they couldn't quite name what. Monica had closed her eyes for a moment, not sleeping, just thinking. The hum of the plane masked her breath as she turned over the events in her mind. Not with anger, more like confirmation. She'd seen this scene play out a dozen times, different faces, different cities, always the same undertone. But today felt different. Not because it surprised her, but because the people around her had been surprised. That's what stuck. When the landing gear thudded into place, Monica reopened her eyes. Caitlin appeared once again, standing quietly in front of her row. "I don't mean to bother you," she began, fidgeting slightly. "But can I ask something?" Monica looked up. "Sure. What do you want people to take from today?" It wasn't a question Caitlin expected to ask, but it came out anyway. Genuine. Monica thought for a second. "That we need to stop measuring people by how expensive their clothes look, or how much noise they make when they walk into a room." Caitlin nodded, slowly. "Also," Monica added, "it's okay to admit you didn't know something. But once you do know, you have a responsibility to act differently." Caitlin opened her mouth like she was going to say more. Then she closed it. She just nodded again and walked away. A few rows back, the little girl had unbuckled early and stood in the aisle. Her mum tried to pull her back down, but she was already moving forward, juice box still in her hand. She stopped at 2A and looked up. "Hi," she said, wide-eyed. "Are you really the boss of the plane?" Monica smiled. "Something like that?" The girl beamed. "You look like my auntie." Monica tilted her head slightly. "Is that a good thing?" The girl laughed. "Yeah, she's super smart, and she always wins at Uno." "Well then," Monica said, "I take that as a compliment." The girl's mom caught up, gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Sorry about that. She's a little bold sometimes." "No need to apologize," Monica replied. She said more truth in 2 sentences than most people say in a whole flight. The mom hesitated, then leaned in just a bit. "For what it's worth, you handled that with more grace than I think I would have." "Thank you." Monica nodded. "It's not about me. It's about what she saw, and what she'll remember." They made their way back to row 4. In 17D, the man with the Stanford sweatshirt pulled out his phone, opened his notes app again, and stared at the blinking cursor. This time, he typed something else. Prejudice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands quietly in a doorway, blocking the way. He didn't know if he was going to post it, but he needed to write it down. The seatbelt signs dinged. Flight attendants secured the cabin. The tires kissed the tarmac a few minutes later. People clapped softly, as they always do when they land. But there was no excitement in it, more like release. Everyone remained seated. Except Monica. She stood calmly, slid her folder under her arm, and turned to walk down the aisle. People moved back to make room. Nobody stopped her this time. Not because they knew who she was now, but because they realized they should have made space from the start. But the real weight of the moment wouldn't land until they were back on the ground, when some of them would carry this story home, and a few might finally start asking different questions. The terminal was busy as always. People moved in every direction, dragging wheeled bags, checking phones, greeting family. But for a few passengers from Flight 2198, the walk to baggage claim felt different. They weren't just thinking about connections and rental cars. They were thinking about her. Monica Rhodes exited through Gate C5 with the same steady pace she had when she boarded. No rush, no need to look back. A car was already waiting. Black sedan, windows tinted. The driver stepped out, opened the back door, and smiled. "Morning, Ms. Rhodes." "Morning, Devon. Thanks for being on time." "Always." She climbed in without ceremony. No paparazzi, no media, no fuss. Just another passenger leaving the airport. Except she wasn't. Not to those who'd seen what happened. Back inside, Caitlin stood near the gate, staring out the window as the plane was being prepped for the return leg. The same cabin, the same crew. But she wasn't the same. She would speak to someone that evening, maybe her roommate, maybe her mom, and try to explain it. She'd get halfway through the story before stopping to say, "You just had to be there." Down in the terminal, that little girl tugged on her mother's hand again. "Do you think I could fly one of her planes one day?" Her mother smiled. "You can do more than that, baby. You can own them." The girl didn't answer right away, but she looked ahead with the kind of quiet determination only kids have, like the idea wasn't just possible, but inevitable. Elsewhere, the man in the law sweatshirt sat at a charging station, typing furiously on his laptop. He'd ditched his original flight review and was now writing something else, something personal, something he'd kept locked up too long. He wrote about pride, about mistakes, about the way people look at someone and decide who they are in the span of a glance. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to tell the truth. And Monica? She never once mentioned the incident to corporate, didn't email, didn't complain. The regional director had already sent her a message asking if she wanted disciplinary action taken against the crew. She replied with one sentence, "Use it as a training moment, not a punishment." He called her later that night. "You sure?" "I didn't come here to shame anyone," she said. "I came here to fly." "You handled that with class." She didn't respond, because she knew that wasn't the point. She hadn't handled it with class. She'd handled it with restraint, something she shouldn't have had to do, but did anyway. Because that's what people like her often do. Not because they want to, because they have to. And still, somehow they leave room for grace. By the time the sun set over Portland that evening, the story had already begun to spread. Not on social media, not on the news, but in living rooms, on porch steps, in phone calls between friends. Stories like that don't always go viral. Sometimes they just stick. And next time, when someone sees a woman walking onto a plane in old jeans and a hoodie, carrying no visible badge of power or wealth, maybe they'll pause. Maybe they'll hold their judgment a second longer. Maybe they'll remember Flight 2198. And maybe, just maybe, that second will be enough to change the whole outcome. Because the lesson wasn't about who Monica Rhodes was. It was about how easily we forget that power doesn't always wear a suit. If this story made you feel something, share it. Talk about it. Let someone else hear it. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe for more stories that matter. Not just to entertain, but to remind us of what still needs to change.